Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. We've got another great webcast here, Threat Intelligence, the key to complete vulnerability management strategy. I've got Tom Diakino and Sandy Hawk here with me. I'll go ahead and hand it over to Sandy now.
Thanks so much, Vince, and I also want to thank the attendees. We realize that your time is really limited. You guys are juggling a lot of balls in the air, so we really appreciate you taking some time to hear about our perspective on vulnerability management. So, our thesis in this presentation is a pretty basic one, really. The best way to manage vulnerabilities is to view them in the context of threat. If you're doing like periodic vulnerability scans and then trying to figure out which systems you need to patch, which ones you can't patch right away, and then use some sort of workaround, and all the while trying to figure out where to start, that's not really going to put you in a good place in terms of managing your risk. So we're going to look at how to rethink vulnerability management, as well as look at some of the operational challenges you may be experienced in trying to manage your vulnerability programs, and then we'll also discuss some strategies on how to overcome those challenges. We'll cover how Alien Vault Labs Threat Intelligence helps you prioritize which vulnerabilities to remediate. And then we'll also have Tom take us through a live demo of how our unified approach works. So enough context setting, let's get started. Why do we do vulnerability management? If your child asked you that question, how would you answer? And it's really pretty basic. It's because that's what attackers exploit. Vulnerabilities are weaknesses, and weaknesses can be exploited by really bad people who want to do you harm. So we have to manage those things, right? We have to manage those weaknesses. But somewhere along the way, we got lost on our original purpose. Why isn't vulnerability management done in the context of real active threats hitting your environment? Well, unfortunately, most security teams become sort of more focused on finding all the vulnerabilities, all of them, right? And they use products that did one thing only, and that was just vulnerability discovery. And then what you have to do is once you discover those vulnerabilities, you have to categorize them. You have to then focus on remediating them, reporting to your upper management you're doing the right thing. And that becomes sort of the management process, and you end up taking sort of a checklist approach. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're more secure or that you're more effective at fixing the weak links that matter in your network. So if you're treating vulnerability management sort of like this siloed effort and focusing more on the management side than the actual threat angle, you're not really ever sure where you're starting or why you're starting there. So that really ends up resulting in a bunch of operational challenges that sort of take your eye off the ball, if you will. So let's talk about some of those operational challenges with common vulnerability management programs. When you have a lot of things to look at in any project, whether it's security or anything else, the goal for your success is to prioritize effectively, right? So which vulnerability matters most to you and why? What's the larger risk context? Who's looking at those vulnerabilities? Who's targeting them? Why would they care about targeting that specific vulnerability, right? So trying to rethink that. But it's a challenge prioritizing, right? And the next challenge also is when you have just an inundation of information about your environment, it's really hard to filter out the false positives because not every technology is going to be perfect. And a lot of folks sort of spend a lot of time trying to vet technologies and coming up with the ones that have the lowest false positive rating. But there are other things you can do as well. So we'll talk to that challenge, but it is a common challenge. And then the other one is, like with any major complicated project that involves a lot of data and information and you have to do it very quickly, is you want to look at ways to optimize your workflow. So how can you minimize disruption? Anytime you knock on a door in vulnerability management, that's what you're doing. You're probing your endpoints in your environment. It may impact operations. So you want to make sure that you minimize your disruption of your environment, but you maximize the accuracy of the results. And what we're encouraging folks to think about is going from that static report to active remediation, right? And oftentimes that goes down to, I'm looking through my checklist report, I'm trying to figure out who owns this vulnerable asset that I need to talk to them about fixing, and it ends up becoming a real nightmare. So You know, I've been doing this for a while. In fact, one of my first jobs was doing network vulnerability assessment for companies. And unfortunately, the tools we were using would just spit out this long report, and it looked like this long binder. And it's sort of like, well, what are you supposed to do with this deluge of information? And that's really what this binder represents. Oftentimes, I'd get frustrated because when I started the vulnerability scan of an environment, the data that I got, by the time it was finished, the data at the start of the vulnerability assessment was no longer accurate, right? Because things change constantly. So looking at it a static way is really difficult, right? So it really comes down to what to prioritize, right? And that's why I like to start here and talking about this. The goal is to avoid viewing your vulnerabilities sort of in a vacuum, right? And most of us fall into that habit of looking at our vulnerabilities in the way we value our assets according to the business priority of those assets. But what we're going to posit here is that a better way to view your vulnerabilities is in the context they find themselves in your network. So try to put on the hat of an attacker, right? Think of those vulnerabilities the way an attacker would. Which ones are most likely to be exposed? And keep in mind, and this is a difficult one because we're perfectionists in the security industry. We want to fix every broken thing we find. But unfortunately, not every vulnerability can be fixed. There are some systems that may require very specific versions of software. Sometimes when you put a patch in place, it breaks functionality, unfortunately. Some vulnerabilities often don't even have patches available yet, right? And so it becomes really untenable. So rather than try to remove all vulnerabilities all at once, right, instead what we're saying is manage it by understanding what vulnerabilities commonly exist on your network, prioritize investigation on the hosts that are known to be sort of more vulnerable over time, and remember that for a vulnerability to be exploited, it must be exposed to a threat. Right? So high-impact vulnerabilities on a server that no one sees, that isn't connected to the rest of the network, even if it's a high impact, it presents much lower risk, right, than a medium-impact vulnerability on an internet-facing machine in like a DMZ or something like that. So you need to answer these questions, right? You need to understand kind of what is installed on those systems, where do they live in your network, what kind of controls segment those systems from the rest of your environment and from public-facing networks, like DMZ environments. You need to know who owns the systems because invariably you're going to have to talk to that person. If you're not the administrator of it, you'll need to make sure you get them involved so that you can effectively mitigate the risk. And answering these questions quickly, all in one place, is really going to help you be successful in your vulnerability management program. And thankfully, we at Alien Vault offer that capability in our USM product, which Tom will take us through here in a second. In the meantime, I just kind of wanted to show a quick static screenshot to give you a sense of what we mean by viewing vulnerabilities in the context of active threat. So this is a sample of one of our alarms in our system. And basically, USM is taking in all kinds of data about your environment. We're taking in asset inventory information. We're collecting log data. We're analyzing those logs. We're taking in information from our onboard IDS technologies. That's host-based as well as network-based. And we're also taking in feeds from our own threat intelligence. So we can immediately identify any known malicious IPs that are targeting vulnerabilities in your environment. So that's going to make it much more focused. So you're reviewing vulnerabilities inside the context of an active alarm from an active threat from an active malicious user. So the first stage there is you want to identify and validate that that truly is a malicious IP. You can click on that box there you see in the upper left-hand corner and actually go to a page that we have on our website that analyzes this stuff in real time. So you can find out more information about that host in France. You can find out what kind of attacker they are. What you'll then want to do is review the vulnerabilities on that asset to see if it aligns with what that particular malicious attacker is trying to do or trying to exploit. And then thirdly, we don't just sort of trigger alarms and then let you figure out like what to do about them because it's really difficult to know the best remediation strategy and the best response. And so we actually have customized alert instructions where we're interpreting what that particular alarm is recognizing, what vulnerability it's trying to exploit, and then we provide you step-by-step guidance on further investigating it and then responding to the threat, all again in the context of your environment. So another challenge here is trying to get rid of false positives. I think probably, and Tom, you'll probably agree with me too, because you do a lot of vulnerability assessment work, is, that's a big headache, is you're going to have to give a report to, your management team, your auditors, maybe you have PCI compliance requirements, and you have to show them a report. And if you know that items on there are truly false positives because you've done manual validation and verification, and it's just for whatever reason the scanner is just not picking it up accurately, you have to explain yourself to management. And oftentimes those guys aren't technical, so it's really hard to describe. You'd rather just take it off. Well, thankfully, in our report, you have that capability. It's once you've validated that there are false positives, you can just click an option to not see them, right? Because you've validated that they're not really there and they're not accurate. And even before that happens, actually, we have options for you to choose from in terms of the kinds of technologies that you want to put in place to validate and identify vulnerabilities. And one is what we're calling continuous vulnerability monitoring. And what we do is we take the rich information that we're collecting from our asset discovery and inventory scans, and we're correlating that information against known vulnerabilities in our vulnerability database. So behind the scenes, we're identifying potential exposures and vulnerabilities and weaknesses in your environment without actually sending any packets across the wire. So the benefit there is you're reducing the network noise, you're minimizing system impact, and it's continuously working on your behalf. The other side of this, and this is the more sort of common approach, is to do active network scanning to find vulnerable services and software in your systems. And we offer a lot of varieties of ways to implement that, right? You can choose IP segments. You can do it at certain points of the day. You can do it on a recurring basis. And then finally, based on what those systems involve and their importance in your environment, you can do authenticated scanning where you're going to get highly accurate results. But like with anything in security, the closer you get to an asset, you get more accurate results, but then you also potentially may impact that particular system. And I know that's a sensitivity for many of us. So if you're less concerned about accuracy, but more concerned about sort of keeping things up, you can go for an unauthenticated scan. And a lot of what our customers do is they segment their network based on sort of the sensitivity of the asset, and they determine which one makes more sense based on their environment. But it's nice to have those options, and that's also going to help you reduce false positives because you have complementary technologies validating the vulnerabilities that you're finding in your network. And then finally, when it comes time to report, you can suppress any false positives that sort of didn't make it through that filter. All right, and in any time you're doing something repeatedly, and in security, it's great. We're in this industry where we never are done, right? We're always constantly evaluating, are our controls working the way they should? Vulnerability assessment is the same way. You don't just do it once and walk away. It's a continual process, right? So whenever you're doing something continually as a process, you want to streamline it as much as possible, right? So, the typical steps here is you run a scan, you vet the data that comes back, then you prioritize remediation. And sometimes you can patch systems, sometimes you're implementing a workaround or a compensating control, but you want to prioritize based on global threat intelligence. What is this attacker going to try to target in my environment? As well as local intelligence about the operations and the typical baseline of network activity that you're seeing. And then finally, you don't end there. You rerun a validation scan after you do that remediation to make sure that you've indeed fixed the issue. The other area of workflow is you want to make sure that you're documenting your process, right? Because you're going to, again, have to answer to other folks in your organization or outside auditors that you're indeed doing this. And what's great is in Alien Vault USM, and Tom can even show us this, is there's a ticketing system that's integrated. So you see an alarm, you see that alarm that I just showed you has a number of vulnerabilities in the asset being targeted. You just click a button and you create a ticket. You forward it to the person that owns that asset. We actually have notes in our system where you can identify owners of assets to make this a whole lot easier. And it's all documented. They get the closed-loop information on it, and then they can follow it up. And again, the secret to success here is don't make your life more complicated by having point solutions that do one thing. The great secret to our success for our customers is that all of the essential functionality you need is really in one place. in our solution. So this is really a unified approach to vulnerability management, unified approach to security monitoring and security intelligence. So what we do is we have 5 core essential capabilities, right? So the first one is, what's on my network? So we do asset discovery. This includes passive network scanning in terms of listening to network traffic to identify services that could potentially be vulnerable, and also identify what's on a system through software-based asset inventory. So we can install our agent, and that'll identify and enumerate all the software titles that exist on that system. And then we also do the active network scanning where we're picking up and doing the probes to just discover where assets live. Once we know what software is installed on them, then we, of course, want to execute our vulnerability assessment capability. And I mentioned before that we can either use the rich information we're getting from asset discovery and inventory, correlate that against vulnerabilities, again, not sending any packets out in terms of probing the network, or you can complement that with our active network vulnerability testing as well. Finally, you're going to want to search in your environment for active threats, right? So who is targeting vulnerabilities in my environment? And we have a number of IDS technologies on our platform, all included with our product. Network-based IDS from Snort and Suricata. We have host-based IDS from an agent called OSEC, which also performs file integrity monitoring. And we're also, customers also have the opportunity to take advantage of our wireless IDS as well, which is really critical sort of from a physical security standpoint as well. And those are handling known threats. But what about the unknown threats in your environment? Suspicious activity, strange behavior, operational hiccups that may be more than just service availability concerns and more sort of system compromise events and things like that. We also do log collection and analysis. So when you do recognize an issue in your environment, you can do that deeper dive investigation by looking at the raw log events and do that deeper analysis. Once you find an issue between 2 hosts, for example, you can fire up our NetFlow analysis capability where we're doing full packet capture so you can see every single thing that's going between 2 hosts that could potentially signal a threat so you can do better incident response and investigation. A lot of times companies have pursued the path of trying to implement each one of these things individually and then putting another layer of complexity on top to try to bring them all together. What's nice about Alien Vault USM is everything is included, everything coordinated together to deliver that true security intelligence that's fully integrated and going to help you understand what to prioritize in terms of vulnerability and threat detection. We have 1,500 event correlation rules that come out of the box with the product. That's going to help you have targeted incident response for when things are happening in your environment, when vulnerabilities are getting targeted. And all of that is continually updated weekly with our Alien Vault Labs Threat Intelligence, which I'll talk about here in a couple minutes. So a lot of our customers are coming to us because they really need to solve multiple problems, but they don't want to have to manage multiple consoles to do it, right? So whether it's vulnerability management and assessment like we're talking about today, or it's ramping up their IDS capabilities and then correlating that with data from their vulnerability assessment, all that's done in one place. It means that you're going to be able to have very focused, targeted, optimized workflows, especially when it comes time for remediation. And we also offer a lot of different reporting capabilities and in multiple formats to help you with your compliance programs and efforts, as well as just to make sure that you know what to focus on and you're showing your management team you're doing what you can in terms of security improvements and enhancements and constantly improving in that way. And threat intelligence from Alien Vault Labs really does help you understand who's targeting which vulnerabilities in my environment, how they're doing in terms of the specific methods and exploits that they're deploying. And then not only that, but we also tell you what to do about it when we find those things. And our threat intelligence is pretty unique, actually, and I'm going to take a couple minutes to just sort of talk to how we do it and what it includes. We take in raw data from a large cross-section of sources, which contributes highly to the diversity of this data. We have more than 8,000 users of our technology, whether that's our open source SIEM project, which is called Ossim, or our commercial product USM, which I've been talking about today. That contributes to our Open Threat Exchange. We collect normalized event logs from a variety of firewalls, content filters, IPS and IDS devices. web proxies, network devices, web servers, you name it, we're collecting it from those installations. We analyze that raw content to identify the latest attack patterns, who the latest attackers are, and then our labs team processes all that information continually. And that's all designed to produce actionable threat intelligence that's easily consumable by our USM platform. This enables us to, we can identify vulnerabilities that you should prioritize by telling you which vulnerabilities are being used in the latest attacks. That way you know what to focus on more effectively. We're also collecting data from third-party sites, such as other open-source intelligence providers. We monitor hacker forums, and we also subscribe to external reputation services. All of this is really to make sure we know the latest on the key vulnerabilities, the exploits that are targeting them, and then build the rules, updated vulnerability databases, and services you need to detect those threats and respond to them effectively. And that all gets contributed to our threat intelligence subscription content. And we really cover a lot of areas. So all the capabilities I described before need to be continually updated with the latest information. And on a weekly basis, we're delivering that information so you can monitor the threats that are targeting the vulnerabilities in your environment. Basically, we offer up a rich database of OS information for that asset discovery capability I mentioned. We're continually updating our IDS signatures for the network and host-based technologies. And then also, obviously, for vulnerability assessment, that is constantly changing as well. Vulnerabilities are constantly being discovered, and we're constantly updating the intelligence so we can find them in your environment. Our correlation rules are going to help you translate all that raw data into actionable alarms so you know what to do. And in terms of interpreting what those alarms mean and how to respond to them, we offer dynamic incident response templates. There's going to be a different sort of advice for every alarm that we produce, right? And that's going to help you know what to do when one of these alarms happen. We're continually also updating our reporting modules, as well as the plugins that we offer to take in log data from the sources of information you have in your environment. So rich content, broad content. A lot of times people say they have threat intelligence, but they're only looking at the world through one filter, and we're actually looking at the world through a variety of filters, all designed to make your life easier. All right, so enough from me. I'm going to hand things over to Tom, and he's going to take you through how this looks in our product. Tom?
Thank you, Sandy. Appreciate it. And nice presentation. Since we're really focusing on talking about vulnerability capabilities today, I'm going to make sure that the things that we show you here are really consistent or within that context within the Alien Vault product. So we'll just start really briefly in the deployment status dashboard, just to kind of illustrate for you some of the capabilities that are available out of the box. And so that continuous vulnerability scanning concept that Sandy was talking about is really it's basically there ready to go when you set up the Alien Vault platform. There's really not anything specific that you need to do other than to just give the Alien Vault platform visibility into your network traffic. And you do that through a span port, which we leverage in multiple ways. That span port is what allows us to do attack detection through the IDS, as well as collecting the passive inventory information. And we also build out net flow monitoring, which is flow profiles that show how your bandwidth is being consumed. And that's actually really powerful for understanding, how you can prioritize your vulnerability assessment efforts. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But then in addition to that, you can take your more active approach to build out the inventory using our active inventory scanner, and then obviously the vulnerability scanner. And both of these things can be set up as scheduled scans. Again, just building out our inventory with details of the hosts in your environment. And the thing with having the vulnerability scanning built in is that if you are doing vulnerability scanning currently, there's a chance that it's a quarterly thing, or you're having some external provider come in and run a scan periodically throughout the year. And in the spirit of the continuous monitoring concept, we believe that you should be pretty aggressive with this. Rather than doing a monthly scan, why not do a daily or weekly scan? We're pushing vulnerability checks down to this system on a regular basis, at least weekly, and so you might as well take advantage of that and use the system to identify the latest vulnerabilities that are out there and potentially present in your environment. And then when you come to investigate a threat and review the vulnerability status of a system that's under attack, you're really going to have the latest and greatest information to reference there. And so to just kind of jump in and show you a little bit about how you can leverage that NetFlow capability, one of the things that's really great about this is that you get a really clear sense of how the bandwidth is being used in your environment, per port, per protocol, per IP address. And so there's a lot of stuff that you can really focus on here. For example, just looking at the top 10 destination ports that are being leveraged in your environment, and having the visibility to recognize all of that information is really pretty substantial, to be able to drill down and say, hey, okay, all these ports are pretty active in my environment, and we're going to take that into consideration when we start looking at our vulnerability information. So that's one aspect. And then in addition to that, we have a lot of profile information that you can leverage that really breaks down at a statistical level how the bandwidth is kind of interacting in your environment, and it provides a significant number of charts that you can leverage in order to get that visibility. So the profile section provides that for you. And I apologize, my demo environment has some limited information here, so it's not going to be exactly consistent with what you would see in your environment, but you can see how it kind of gives you some graphs and charts that really break down the IP traffic that you're seeing, the types of packets that you're seeing, the ports that are being consumed, the protocol distribution. So all of this stuff is really, really powerful, like I said, for helping you assess the activity that's occurring in your environment, and then pivoting from that into, okay, how do I respond to the information that I've collected through the vulnerability interface? And here's the cool thing, you can look at it per host or per network to really see where your most significant vulnerabilities are. But what about per service? We were just talking about using flow profiles and all of that bandwidth consumption information to understand how your network is actually interacting. We'll use the vulnerabilities by service reference here to really focus on those vulnerabilities that are consistent with how your environment is interacting, right? And that will sort of help you focus your efforts a little bit more around the things that, as Sandy was saying, are actually likely to be impacted in your environment from an attack. And so those two things kind of are sources of information that you can tie together to do a bit of your own correlation and prioritize your efforts accordingly. And, in our demo environment here, just looking at this example, you can see we've got a system here, for example, that's got quite a few vulnerabilities. It's something like 216 total on this particular system, which, is significant from a academic standpoint. Yeah, there's a lot of exposure there, but how this environment or how this system interacts with the network is really significant for understanding the real risk that's being presented by these vulnerabilities. And this system, this Linux 80 host here, might only have 69 vulnerabilities on it, but because of the nature of the system, it might actually be creating much more exposure for you than this Windows 22 host that has far more vulnerabilities on it. And we'll get an example of how to recognize that here in a minute. But just really quickly, let's drill down into one of these vulnerability reports, and you can see some of the things that Sandy was talking about, being able to sort of focus your efforts on specific severities of vulnerabilities. And working through this list, you can identify the details associated with the vulnerability, the potential impact that it can have in the environment, and if there's any kind of external reference or solution that we can provide for you, that'll be available here. So in this case, with this Indio codec vulnerability, we've got some specific details of the potential impact. So this could lead to a remote compromise, and the details of the operating systems that are affected, as well as information about specific resolutions and workarounds, and multiple external third-party resources that you can refer to really get a better understanding of this particular vulnerability. And if you do all of your investigations into this, you think, man, this is a significant issue, I really need to get down to the bottom of it, you apply some patches, you follow your workarounds, do your research or whatever, and you find out at the end of the day, hey, you know what, this is actually a false positive, you can just mark it as such, and it'll essentially be removed from the report, giving you, that mechanism for kind of closing the loop and making sure that this isn't something that you're repeatedly looking at and trying to figure out how to fix and thinking, oh, you know what, I already dealt with this last month or a couple of weeks ago or whatever the case may be. Well, let's just remove it from the report so you don't have to keep looking at it. And that's actually going to provide some additional correlation enhancement on the system that I want to kind of just drill down into for you here really quickly. One of the things that the Alien Vault solution does is, all of these components that we have built into our platform, the intrusion detection, the correlation, and the vulnerability assessment, they're all very tightly integrated so that they can use the intelligence created by each of those components. And all that information really comes together for you in a very insightful way that creates actionable, usable information. And this cross-correlation section here is a good example of that. So what we're doing is actually building out this table which links all of the different intrusion detection signatures that our system, our IDS, would possibly generate, and it connects all of those signatures to the relevant vulnerabilities that could be detected in the environment. And so the power of this is that when the intrusion detection system generates an event, it's going to be sent into the correlation engine, which is going to come do a lookup in this table and find the IPS or IDS signature associated with that particular event. And we're going to cross-reference that to a specific vulnerability. So we'll understand specifically which vulnerabilities can be leveraged by the attack that the attacker is launching at the network. And then from there, we go do a lookup in our asset inventory to figure out if the assets that are being targeted are actually have these the presence of these vulnerabilities. And if they do, then we're going to automatically generate a high-risk alarm letting you know, hey, this attack is occurring on a system that's likely vulnerable to it, and that really helps you focus your efforts. And so, prioritize your efforts around the information that you're responding to. And so managing the vulnerability information that you're collecting and reviewing and marking things as false positives when they're false positives, that's really going to help tune the kind of information that the correlation engine is presenting to you from this cross-correlation capability. And then in addition to that, all the data that we're collecting through the environment is also being passed through, as Sandy was saying, our now over 1,600 correlation directives that are built into the system out of the box. It's very effective at identifying activity that would represent things like brute force authentication attacks, scanning behaviors, and a number of other things that we can look at here in a minute. But, from the vulnerability standpoint, I really want to stay focused on that. So let's jump in and look at some alarms. One of the things that we noted is from our vulnerability report, there were a couple of hosts in there. One of them was this Windows 22 host. And you can see from all of the alarms that are being represented here, these alarms are basically, indications of some kind of problem that was identified in the environment. And all of the alarms that are representing this particular Windows 22 host are basically information indicating that some kind of malware is present, and that this host is, on the internal network, going out to the internet and communicating with lots of hosts out on the internet, that have potential malware activity associated with them, this is very informative and great. But at the end of the day, the vulnerability management may not necessarily be significantly impacted by this. The issue that we have with this host is that there's a user sitting on that system opening lots of attachments or browsing stuff they shouldn't be browsing, clicking on links that are infecting their system and creating problems that way. So, you can do all the vulnerability scanning and assessment in the world on this host, and at the end of the day, it's just not going to help because you've got a problematic user there. So even though this system has 216 vulnerabilities on it, those really aren't the key problem that is creating the issue here. On the other hand, if we focus on our Linux system that we do have vulnerabilities on, we can see brute force authentication attacks that are coming in. These are being launched from the internet into our host, our Linux server on the network. Because of the nature of this host, it's exposed to the internet. It's providing some particular service out to the internet that some folks may need for some reason from outside the network, which essentially opens that system up for attack. And just being able to recognize first that these attacks are occurring, and second that they're occurring from known malicious hosts, as indicated by the little target here for these source IPs. These things are significant to let you know that this is an attack that's occurring, and it's coming from some systems that are known to be launching these types of attacks. And if we drill down into one of these, get some more information from this, we can see, the type of activity that we're collecting from this host is indicating, that, hey, we're getting repeated SSH login failures on this system. And, the destination port associated with all of these attacks is SSH, which is really useful to recognize that the port activity is consistent with the vulnerability information that we've collected. So, for example, on this particular system, if we drill down into the vulnerability information and look at the services that are available here and the vulnerabilities detected here, we do have, in fact, SSH is reported as an open port on this particular system. And so we've kind of, just by doing all of this work previously and collecting this information as actively as we can and as real time as we possibly can, we've got this view very up to date. Whatever vulnerabilities that are going to be present on the system, on the SSH port, they're going to be listed here. And so now you have that added visibility, which is extremely powerful to recognize that, hey, we've got attacks being launched at this host on this port. The port is open, and if it's vulnerable, this is a significant exposure that we need to address. And so you could spend a significant amount of time working on vulnerabilities associated with that Windows 22 host, which in fact are purely academic. That system can't be compromised from the outside because it's not accessible. This system, on the other hand, is accessible and is being hit by systems that are part of our known threat list. And being hit on ports that are accessible through the firewall. And so that's the information that is really going to give you sort of that insight and visibility to kind of take your vulnerability assessment model or process to the next level. So with that, I'm going to jump back over. If there's anything more specific that we'd like to address, any questions that we can bring in at the end, we'd definitely be happy to address those and go through those. Otherwise, Sandy, I'll hand it back to you.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Tom. A great example of, just because you have more vulnerabilities on one host than another, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the one to focus on. So thanks, Tom. So we want to quickly get to the question section. I do see a couple of questions coming in here, so I want to make sure we get to those. In the meantime, What we've talked about for the bulk of the session is how to help you be more effective in vulnerability management, right? And that really comes down to, looking at unifying all of the controls you have in place for security monitoring, and AlienVault USM really does provide those core capabilities so that when you're looking at vulnerabilities, you're not looking at them in a vacuum. You have the rich context to make important decisions about which ones to remediate. That's going to help you prioritize your remediation efforts, make the most use of your time by relying on that emerging threat intelligence that's automatically part of the process and our platform. The goal here is to really move from that and evolve from kind of a checklist reporting approach to really reducing risk by focusing on the assets that are valuable to an attacker in getting a foothold into your network, right? So you're not just taking a checklist approach, you're actually really, really getting to the bottom line of true real risk reduction. So we hope this has been valuable for you. We also hope that you take a little bit of a closer look at AlienVault USM and how we can go to work to help you with your vulnerability management programs. You can download a free 30-day trial of our solution on that link there. We'd love to have you take a look, kick the tires, put it in your own environment, in your own virtual environment, so you can see how our reporting works and all of the scheduling options for vulnerability, and also the rich information we have in terms of the other core capabilities and how all that contributes to really good full context threat detection. We also have an interactive demo site, so if you're not quite ready to install something in your environment today, we welcome you to check out that demo. That way you can click through the things that Tom was just looking at on your own and on your own time. And then we also have a member of our technical team that delivered weekly live demos. So if you wanted to see more of what you just had a sneak preview of, we'd love to have you join us on one of those weekly live demos. We had one this morning. I think they're every Thursday, and we have one next Thursday as well, and we'd love to see you there. In the meantime, you can also just reach out to us at hello@alienvault.com. You could take a look around our website. We have a lot of other rich resources about vulnerability scanning and other technologies that we include in our platform. So, Vince, I think I'm ready to switch things over to the question portion. What do we got? So it looks like Eddie is asking us about the error rate for authenticated versus non-authenticated scans, and I guess what he means by error rate is sort of false positive or accuracy rate for the differences between authenticated or unauthenticated. And Tom, can you comment on that?
Yeah, so I can say, in general, that there is certainly more focused visibility available as a result of authenticating to a host and actually connecting in, whether it be through SSH or through, an SMB type of connection, and that the vulnerability scanner is going to be able to get more detailed information about the host itself, and from there, that also probably the patch level, and to be able to understand some of the the implications of that patch level and the impact on the vulnerabilities. In terms of hard statistics or figures regarding the accuracy of vulnerability detection with authentication versus without, I really don't have anything for you there that says, hey, we see 20% more accuracy or anything like that. But it's just for the folks that are using it, they've found that generally it tends to be a bit more effective in identifying some of those key details about the host that we are authenticating with and pulling information from.
Cool, that's great. Thank you. We've got a question here from Glenn. What's the difference between vulnerability scanning and penetration testing? And I'll give my take on that, Tom, to give your voice a break. Generally, the goals of the two, while sounding similar, are quite different. The goal of a penetration test is to actually penetrate a system, a network, a device, an application, sometimes even a building. You're not done until you actually get through. Vulnerability assessment and management, on the other hand, is probing systems, testing services, applications, network devices, you name it, to try to identify if there's a potential presence of a weakness or vulnerability. That can also be done without probing, like I mentioned. If you have a list of information about what software lives on a system, including detailed about the publisher, the version information, and then correlate that data against a database of known vulnerabilities, you get the same result, right? So the goal for vulnerability assessment is not to break in. The goal of vulnerability assessment is to enumerate all the potential vulnerabilities that may exist in a system, application, OS, what have you. So oftentimes that does involve manual and automated techniques. But I would say to compare that against penetration testing, which I think you're always going to use automated techniques, but with penetration testing, you may indeed go the extra mile and do a lot of manual probing and a lot of manual checks and analysis. Is that the way you would look at it?
Yeah, and if I could just add one more thing to that, using one approach, penetration testing, in lieu of vulnerability assessment, isn't necessarily a good comprehensive plan. So I wouldn't say that it would be okay to use one versus the other. If anything, if you had to choose, I would say vulnerability assessment is going to be your better option, just because in most cases with penetration testing, the team that you hire to perform that effort is really going to pretty much focus on whatever entry point they can leverage to get into the environment, and they're really going to hone in on that and focus on it, and that's the point that they're going to use to breach the environment. And when they're done, they're going to say, okay, we got in, and here's how we got in, and it's going to identify a specific weakness or a specific area that needs some attention in your environment, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they've addressed every weakness in the environment, right? So that's where vulnerability assessment is going to help bridge that gap a little bit. Not to say that vulnerability assessment is going to identify every single weakness in the environment, but it's certainly going to be more effective at giving you a more comprehensive view than doing just penetration testing alone. So I wouldn't use one over the other per se. I think they're both complementary.
Yeah, and you raise a really good point, Tom, which goes back to sort of our original hypothesis, which is the best way to do vulnerability assessment is to think of it the way an attacker would. And if you borrow that approach from a penetration test methodology, that's going to help you be more effective in vulnerability assessment. But you're right, they are very complementary approaches to finding out what's wrong in your environment. Okay, so we have a couple questions here from Darren. Are there any limitations on the number of monitoring ports the Alien Vault system can handle for IDS? So this would be network-based IDS.
Yeah, so I can take that one really quickly. It depends on the unit that you, or the specific Alien Vault product that you decide to move forward with. Typically, we have about 6 interfaces in our physical appliances. Our virtual appliances, certainly you have control to add as many virtual interfaces as you want. So you can run, promiscuous mode interfaces to sniff traffic from lots of different network segments. That's perfectly fine. The more significant limitation is just how much bandwidth can we realistically process through the intrusion detection capability or mechanism. And again, that depends on the specific product that you go with. We have an offering that does 100 megabits per second of intrusion detection throughput. We have an offering that does 1 gigabit per second of intrusion detection throughput, and we also have an offering that does 5 gigabits per second of intrusion detection throughput. So you've got a couple of different options there, and where that traffic comes from is really pretty insignificant to us. You can bring it in through a single interface or multiple interfaces. Just however your network is configured and needs to be monitored is fine.
Great question. And we actually have a second question from Darren as well, which is, does Alien Vault make use of any type of probe for vulnerability assessment on remote networks, right? So the question is, can we do basically external vulnerability scanning? And my understanding there, Tom, and feel free to elaborate, is we need to have local presence on that network because we're actually executing the scan from our sensor, which is a component of our USM platform. So yeah, that sensor, whatever networks that sensor can get to, it can do vulnerability assessment on. Would you?
Yeah, exactly. And you have a couple of different options as well. You can run our product from within the Amazon cloud, And so if you wanted to do a true external assessment and see your environment the way the rest of the world does, that's a good option to put a sensor in the Amazon cloud and run scans from there. And then, from the inside, if you have, let's say, for example, multiple remote sites that you need to monitor, our sensor component is basically the mechanism that does the intrusion detection monitoring. It also does log collection, and the vulnerability assessment scans actually get run from those sensors. So you have sort of a centralized control panel, if you will, where you can control sensors and schedule scans and things of that nature. And so you could put a sensor at your remote site, do log collection, intrusion detection monitoring of that site, and the vulnerability scans will be run there locally. So you're not, running a vulnerability scan across your WAN or through a VPN or something silly like that. You're not getting blocked by firewalls. You get a true view into what the actual vulnerabilities are that are present on the local network segment.
Great question. Thanks, Tom. Another question from Eddie is if we integrate with SIEM, and he's listed a couple of those tools here, ArcSight being one of them. We actually have our own SIEM capability built into USM. That was when I was mentioning before, we've got the 15, or actually now 1,600 event correlation directives or policies that we apply against all the data that we're collecting from your environment, including raw logs, as well as all of the core capabilities in terms of asset discovery, asset inventory, the vulnerability assessment we talked about. All of that contributes to that event correlation and that SIEM capability. So we don't need to integrate with other SIEMs because we have that SIEM capability and event correlation on board integrated into our platform.
Yeah, and to take a step back for the folks that are less familiar with the Alien Vault USM platform, it has built in a couple of key monitoring capabilities that are consistent with other more traditional SIEM vendors. So we have a syslog service built in that allows us to bring in events through the syslog protocol, maybe from your network gear, your routers and firewalls and things like that, as well as collecting data from antivirus that might be deployed in your environment. We can bring in information from your servers, from your audit logs, your databases, all of those things we can collect data from and bring them in and bring that information in and correlate it and really give you some substantial visibility there. And our perspective is that, or our feeling is that we kind of actually take SIEM to the next level because of the built-in pre-integrated capabilities that we have, the intrusion detection system, the vulnerability assessment. There's not another SIEM vendor out there on the market that actually comes with a vulnerability tool built in, that actually comes with an intrusion detection system built in. You're not going to get that from any of these other vendors. And when you actually look at, from a cost perspective, what Alien Vault offers, we're going to provide you with IDS, vulnerability assessment, host-based intrusion detection, file integrity monitoring, and SIEM at a price that's probably less than getting just one of those technologies from another vendor.
Excellent. Thanks, Tom. Well, it looks like we're very close to the top of the hour, so I'm going to hand things over to Vince.
All right. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today, and just a quick reminder, we would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. So if you can use that rating and feedback button at the top of your screen there, we'd love to hear from you, and hope you all have a great day.